Welcome back to the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. Grateful to have you here once again. I'm excited this week to bring into you a topic. For those of you that don't know, or maybe didn't realize that I had worked and still do on occasion as a wildlife biologist. I'm actually a member of the Wildlife Society, which is a really an international group, but based here in the United States, I should say. But I've been a member for most of my career. Actually, we have a national organization, a section called the Western Section, and then even a local chapter here in Southern California. And one of the things we get as a member of that is called the wildlife professional. So those of you that are checking out this video, you'll see the latest uh, release of that comes out every couple months. And as I was reading that today, I was reading an article by Rodgers, who is serving in the leadership role here at the Wildlife Society, and and so it caused me to think. He made a statement there that communication skills, I'll quote this, are essential in the wildlife profession. Wildlife management often requires an understanding of human behavior and the ability to modify behaviors and attitudes to benefit wildlife and their habitats. And I've learned one thing for sure in my career as a wildlife biologist, a conservationist, one that wants to see our natural resources preserved and managed well for future generations, is that we have to understand how human beings work, how human beings think, and not just the wildlife. I love studying the wildlife. I've spent my career doing that. But if we don't understand that part of it, the human side with the wildlife side, we won't achieve the goals. The goals of um, inspiring and conserving wildlife for future generations, um, and really the Wildlife Society as an organization that I hold in high regard because of the fact that they really look to align this vision and developing wildlife professionals to effectively do the work technically, but it requires engaging people and human beings in this endeavor. And so, you know, this whole podcast is know yourself to lead yourself, right? If we understand ourselves, we can lead ourselves and we can lead others. And that goes for not just the organizations we're in, but the other folks that we're working with, stakeholders. And so as we understand our own personal tendencies, our strengths, we can better align ourselves with our passions and goals and make sure that they're going within the organizational's goals. Um, I was reviewing the strategic plan earlier today that the Wildlife Society had that was really clear on the things they're looking to achieve. And so, when we look at these things, it's really important that we link them up together. We link up kind of our technical skills and the things we want to achieve, and we want to lead well how we're going to execute on that. And like you said in this article, if we don't have the right communication skills, doesn't matter how well technically we are at understanding wildlife or studying them in this example, achieving that, if we can't link that up and having that understanding. And so today on the podcast, I wanted to explore this knowing yourself to lead yourself, how to achieve key goals. And the Wildlife Society has them, your organization has them. And if you're not clear on that, that can be really challenging to achieve them. And so, as we again know ourselves to lead ourselves, we understand our tendencies and our strengths. Then we can use tools like the Five Voices framework that you've heard me talk about in previous episodes to help identify your own style and its impact on others. What is it like to be on the other side of you, affecting, um, you know, what you're saying, how you're showing up, right? And when we're conscious of this and active, we can actually have a much greater influence. I talk about influence and impact a lot on this podcast because I want to have you not just fill you with knowledge and information. This podcast is to help you be equipped and to take this and apply it in real life. Number one, knowing you're not alone. Number two, knowing you have an advocate here and David Carr of Steward Your Business to help you along that journey. Because oftentimes, we don't have anybody outside of ourselves. We are kind of in an echo chamber, and we don't even realize we may be asleep to this. And so, looking at communication that was brought up in this article recently, in the Wildlife Professional, um, it's really important that you know you as a professional, whether you're a wildlife professional or not, use clear and compelling communication to unite members, to inspire action, right? And as we understand this about ourselves, we can learn how to do that in an effective way that doesn't undermine our natural gifts, our natural strengths and abilities. Some of those things that are your greatest assets can also be liabilities if you're not careful with it. And so knowing yourself and helping tailor your communication to different audiences, whether it's team members, policymakers, or the public, is going to really help be key to your success or not. That's what he was talking about in this article about, it requires an understanding of behavior and modify those behaviors and attitudes to benefit the wildlife in this case, in this organization. Because if we don't do that, we may be literally, doing more harm than good. I was talking to a county official today on a different project, and we were talking about this, and we were in a way lamenting some of the um, challenges in communication with a different regulatory agency, and how to work our way through it. How do we achieve the desired outcome? Together rather than kind of being at odds and being roadblocks to each other. And so as you understand this, we can then, align, get over these gaps and get in line in our efforts. We can start to move a little closer to the shared objective. What's the win here? And getting clear on that. Otherwise, we are kind of at odds with each other. And so being, you know, practicing, for example, active listening and adapting your style to know who am I talking to? What drives them? What motivates them? What's their uh, way of thinking? How do they make decisions? And this is something I dive deeper, much deeper in the five voices. And in fact, I'm going to be doing Five Voices boot camps coming up here. This, for those of you that are listening to me, I'm recording this at the beginning of December. We will have those coming up in December 11th and December 30th this month. So if you hear those and you want to know more about them, reach out to me. I'd love to get you plugged in. It's a free opportunity for you to come in and work with myself and another guide, if you will, and coach in the space. Wonderful collaborator, Julia Carlton, which you'll probably hear on my Business Roundtable podcast at some one point. But nonetheless, providing another space, another opportunity for you to get better understanding and how to communicate and how to have greater effectiveness in how you lead yourself and others around you. Um, and so the bigger picture here is how do we align, our personal and organizational vision. Part of this in the communication is that the Wildlife Society as an organization, they were really important and intentional about, how do we get our leaders to see this? How do we create this vision? We've created a strategic plan, for example. How do we make this effective? And so, um, to drive meaningful action. So what you want to be able to do in any organization is, ideally, you wanna look at yourself and what is your personal purpose? What is it that drives you? What are your values? And can get aligned with the organization and where they're going. One thing you can do in this that'll help you is write a personal vision statement. Make sure that it aligns with the team or organizational mission. This is discussed in the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People too, if you've read that book. But it talks about, understanding that, what is a personal mission statement, a vision? What is it for you? Are you clear on that? Do you know what you really want? Because this goes back to communicating. Because if we're fuzzy with it, it's hard. Nobody can tell you what it is. You need to figure that out for yourself. Again, leading yourself well, right? And then aligning that with the vision of the other company or the organization you're a part of, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, like the Wildlife Society. But this is important because as we do this, we can then get this bigger picture, but get this bigger vision of ourselves and say, oh man, I'm a part of this. This is something that's important to me. I see where I fit in here and how I can help achieve this goal. But if you don't have that understanding, you don't know how to fit into that greater framework. Um, and so I want to encourage you here on the podcast today to dig deeper here a little bit. Don't just keep, you know, putting your head down, but I want you to pause here and look and say, do I have a personal mission and vision statement? Do I have the values? Do they align with that of the company? Or is it off for the organization? Um, because when there's challenges, we're going to get to that in a minute. When there's challenges and unexpected things come up, it's going to test those. It's going to test that the resolve. It's going to test your commitment. And so, the Wildlife Society has made a very intentional effort to build community in this particular organization. And oftentimes, what I found as I help business owners is they kind of take their hand off the wheel, so to speak, and they just think it's just going to happen somehow. And it doesn't, unfortunately. Those that are strategic, purposeful, intentional are much more likely to achieve that and build the community. And others that don't, it won't happen. It's like you know not doing an oil change or not uh, rotating your tires on a regular basis. You're just like, well, I'll just drive it. It drives. It works. It works. It works. Eventually, it's going to break down. But if you do these more proactive things, it's going to go much further. And so one of the things that the Wildlife Society did in this example is they wanted to build an inclusive community of wildlife professionals, for example. And so, how do you do that? Well, you have to foster connection. You have to foster collaboration across diverse groups, and that is something that in this letter, Art Rodgers is talking about. Is we've got lots of different stakeholders. People have different ideas on things, and so if we don't figure out how to build community, we're not likely going to be able to reach our goals. We're going to have to, work with others and understand again what drives them, what's important to them, and see about how do we uh, come alongside them and not be so triggered or put off or kind of, emotionally immature, if you will. Unfortunately, because we don't understand our own selves well enough. We don't understand. Oh, well, this is the way I naturally show up, and this is where it's different. And I've talked about this in previous episodes about the different voice styles of connector, creative, pioneer. And once you start to understand this, it really unlocks your brain to a way of understanding people in a non-judgmental way, in a way that doesn't really help the situation. Meaning we kind of go to our corners and we just kind of have these walls or stories or narratives, if you will, that really don't serve us. And so it's breaking that down. Um, and an example of this is I worked on a huge project here in Southern California called the Tehachapi Renewable Transmission Line Project. We had so many different stakeholders in this. If we didn't actively work on building community, granted, it was challenging at times, but we're like, we all need to work together. We have different um, individual objectives, but the whole is here's the overall whole that is trying to be achieved. And how do we do this holistically? How do we do this in a considerate way? And it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes intentionality. It doesn't just happen. And once you start to understand this about yourself, for me, I knew over the course of this project for 7 years, I was a connector. I was a person that could bring different people together. That was where my strength was. You know, Maybe not so technical or checking off some boxes or going through certain things, but I knew for me it was the individual people, getting them lined up in the right place and making sure that they have the resources that they need. That's what I do as a connector. While there was other people that were just amazing at being very detail oriented, what I call a guardian voice, going through, checking off everything, making sure all the systems and processes are right. We need those people too. We need the people that could be, you know, uh, the creatives coming up with some new ideas and ways of adjusting and how they get things done. So, anyways, this is just an example of very small one here of why, as wildlife professionals in particular, if you're trying to help, achieve wildlife uh, conservation, benefit wildlife and their habitats, as we talk about in the article here, you have to learn that you've got to invest in doing these other skills, not just have the technical skills, which oftentimes we kind of double down on the technical skills. Oh, well, that's just all I need is more. But we neglect this side of the coin, so to speak, of communication, leading ourselves. And one of the earliest podcasts I talked about was investing in yourself and coaching. And if you're listening to me this far along, which I'm so grateful for, if you've listened to all these episodes, thank you. If you've missed one and you just listened to this one the first time, go back. You can see where I talk about investing in yourself and why that's so important. And as we go through this, as we first understand ourselves better, and then we can start to adapt. But you can't adapt communication to different audiences and goals if you're not clear about that yourself. I talked to a client yesterday about this, and we were talking about her boss and how she was saying that he needs to show up one way, but I don't think it's really the way he naturally shows up, and he's trying to play this role. And when we're trying to take on a role or act a way that's just not really our natural way of being, and that's we're trying to do that most of the time, it's going to be really awkward. It's going to probably come off inauthentic, and if you're not clear about that, and you're just like, "Oh, I guess that's the way I'm supposed to show up," and it's kind of been trained and told that way, but in reality, you're like, I'm presenting a behavior style. I've talked about this in my power framework, versus what is my preferred style and way of being, and not making excuses for it, just recognizing, hey, this is the way I naturally show up, and that's the way I'm going to have the best impact and influence when I understand that. Also, when I understand what my tendencies are, my triggers that that come out of that natural space. Like I said earlier in the podcast, things that are assets to us can also be liabilities if we're not careful, um, in how we wield them, right? So, how you can adapt and you know navigate unexpected challenges, which will come, right? It's not if, it's when they come. And in this article, he talked about numerous surprises and unexpected events that came up with the leadership, and this is going to happen with you, your organizations. You're going to have an unexpected blowout, your unexpected challenge. For example, here in California, we have a listed species that wasn't anticipated to be listed, Crotch's bumblebee. And for those of you that are like, "Oh my goodness, there's a bumblebee that's affecting development and impacts." Yes, absolutely. This is the world we live in. This is the regulatory framework that we find ourselves in. And so there's things that come up, and so how do we adjust to that? How do we navigate through this? And as we have greater self-awareness, we can then adjust our communication and strategies, if you will, in different contexts, and how we can approach both internal and external um, team members or stakeholders. And so I want you to reflect on recent interactions that you've been having. Identify where maybe you could have adapted for better results, but you kind of went hard and you dug your heels in, or you got defensive, or you shut down, and you didn't understand, oh, like, what is this? What's this other person like? What's this? What are they experiencing? Like I said, on the other side of me. And so when we start to unpack that, we're going to have a much greater influence and impact on those around us. And ultimately, what we want to do is build trust through ethical communication, being real, being true. We're not looking for fakeness. We're not looking for you to, be somebody you're not. Uh, but one of the things, again, that I really appreciate about the Wildlife Society is they're striving to be ethical, have integrity, and again, when we're transparent and authentic in our communication, we build credibility, we build trust, and essentially, this is what we need to be a long-term goals. Um, I watched a video today about deep fakes because we're in the age of AI and all these things. But when you're truly authentic, through and through. You're not going to throw off people because they're going to know about you and your what you drive, what is important to you, what do you stand for. And if somebody tries to deep fake you, if you will, and this is a real thing now, trying to scam you or trying to manipulate you, it's going to be incongruent with hopefully who you really are. And so if somebody tries to deep fake me, for example, you're not going to hear me saying me something that is counter to my values, something about just being authentic or just try to like pretend you're somebody else. If you're hearing something, that's not consistent with who I am and what I'm about. And so when you see and you start to realize, oh, that's inauthentic, that's not, that isn't ethical, that's not consistent with what I know David subscribes to, and the values are, the warning bell should be going off, right? And so we want you to make sure that you're clear on your core values and your principles and what do you stand for? Who are you? What are you about? Make sure that that's clear and you communicate that and articulate that well. Because if you don't do that and you're kind of trying to be a chameleon, and now again, there's a point of adapting, but adapting meaning saying is true to who you are. Uh, and there's a point of for those of you that like music, we have piano and forte. There's a range, right? You still play the same note. The note isn't changing. It's the loudness of the note, if that makes sense. And so, I'm saying play the notes that are you, authentically you, and learn how to string those together, how to make a melody, if you will, a musical symphony, if you will, how you interact with others. That's a beautiful thing. But when when it's not incorporated and collaborated and thought through and communicated well, it can be very damaging. It can be very ineffective. And so as I wrap up the podcast today, inspired by this letter by Dr. Art Rodgers of the Wildlife Society, which again you can read in the December 2024 issue. For those of you that want to dig into it, check it out. Become a member. It's a great organization. But that all being said, knowing yourself to lead yourself, aligning your personal and organizational goals, then this will help you be much more effective in the way that you communicate. I want you to look at your communication habits and identify maybe an area for improvement for you. And if it's not Wildlife Society, it's a different professional organization, all good. But I want to encourage you: is this organization looking about helping you become a better leader? Is a better collaborator? In this case, communication is key to achieve our goals and objectives. And you have myself here at the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast with Steward Your Business as a resource, as an advocate, as one that will help you in coming into a community, a space with others that are looking to better themselves. The point is, we're on this journey. We can go much further together than we can alone. And I do free discovery calls where we can find out whether or not the tools and the resources that I have are a good fit for you, or perhaps somebody else as you're listening to this podcast. Share it. I appreciate your comments, your 5-star reviews, of course, and interacting with me means so much. I want to just thank you for listening, being intentional, showing up, improving, and pouring into yourself. Because really, what I hope with this podcast is an opportunity for you to take some time out of your day to listen and to pour into yourself, to say, I'm worth it. I'm important. I've got a lot to offer, and I want to better communicate that to the world. Thank you again for being a part of this journey. I come with you along every week, and again, it's an honor and a privilege. I look forward to having you. If you are able to join me in one of these Five Voices boot camps, it would be great to have you there. Just remember that as you know yourself to lead yourself, you're going to have that greater awareness for effective leadership. Being raising your quality of communication, bridging that gap between your personal alignment and organizational success, and ultimately being authentically you, ethically, morally, adapting and becoming the person that really can lead others because you know how to lead yourself well. Appreciate you guys for listening once again. Until next time, take good care. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.